Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name's Tom. I'm a GP and the creator of Zero to Finals. And in this video, I want to talk a bit about perfectionism and one specific aspect of perfectionism, which we'll come on to a bit later. So I'm going to do this by kind of illustrating on this iPad here. So perfectionism. This is kind of this idea that everything has to be perfect. If you're going to attempt something, you need to make sure all the conditions are perfect and the output from whatever you're attempting is perfect. And there's some pros and cons to this. So people tend to sort of err towards being a perfectionist. It's definitely something that I personally have found to be a challenge. Is a personality trait that I have, and whenever I do something with work, I have a tendency to try to want to make it perfect. And this seems to be a family trait. I don't know if it's something that's genetic or not, but people in my family tend to also have this tendency. So in terms of the pros, I mean, there's some good things about being a perfectionist. It means that if you're working on something, you tend to have high standards, and the quality tends to be high as well. So if you have, say, you have an architect or an accountant, or even say a doctor, and they're looking after you for some reason, they're providing you with a service. It's quite nice to know that they're a perfectionist and that the work that they produce for you is going to be a really high standard. Kind of makes you feel, okay, I can trust this person. I think they're going to do a good job because they're a perfectionist. So that's a pro. Another thing is there's good attention to detail. If you're working with a perfectionist, say an accountant, you feel comfortable that they're going to pick up on any accounting errors and things are going to go well because they're trying to get things perfect. You don't want someone who's kind of sloppy, doesn't really care, just puts in a half an effort into the job, and then the result is that there's mistakes and you end up with some kind of trouble with a HMRC or ending up paying more tax than you expected or anything like that. And then the third thing is there's a kind of strive for improvement. Sorry for my bad handwriting. So, if you're a perfectionist, you probably have a tendency towards trying to get better at the things that you're doing. And the result of that is that over time, you do get better at the things you want to do. And that's a good thing for everybody. So, striving for improvement is the third one I've got on my list. I'm sure there's plenty of other pros here, but we need to keep the list manageable. Now there are quite a few cons, and I think everybody's heard that interview question of what would you say is your biggest weakness? And people come out often with the answer of, oh, I'm a perfectionist. And what they're trying to do is wrap up something that appears good as a weakness. But there are quite a few cons to being a perfectionist. One of them is spending too long on tasks. So being a bit slow, and the result of this is that if you're slow doing one task and you've got a whole queue of tasks waiting to be done, you might not get onto the final tasks. And say you're in an exam situation and you've got 150 questions to answer over 3 hours, and you're really trying to get every question perfect. You might only get halfway through. You might get to like 75, 80 out of 150 questions. And then because you're spending too long going through those questions, you never get to the final ones. And so you miss out on 50% of the marks. Even if you get 100% on the 80 questions you attempt, the 70 questions that you didn't attempt are going to bring your mark way down. So spending too long is a big issue. The second one is feeling overwhelmed and stressed. So if you're trying to make everything perfect, the reality is that the world is not a perfect place. It's basically impossible to make everything you do perfect. And this can become quite overwhelming. If you want to, say, in my job as a GP, if you wanted to check that every single administrative task, every kind of repeat prescription, every sort of detail of a patient's presentation is absolutely perfect, you essentially couldn't manage the one day's worth of work in a week because there's just so many decisions you have to make, so many things you have to review that you have to accept that you can't do everything perfectly. You have to compromise on things where, say, a mistake is not going to be something that's, going to have big repercussions. So you need to kind of balance your tendency towards perfectionism and making sure everything's good with the fact that it's just impossible for everything to be perfect. If you are trying to make everything perfect, you're going to be so stressed and overwhelmed, and you'll be that GP or whatever profession you're in who spends their entire life working because you're trying to tick every box, dot every I, cross every T. And the third downside is difficulty delegating. And this is an important skill in life. It's impossible for one person, for you to do everything you need to do. You'll just become completely overwhelmed and burnt out. And if you're trying to achieve anything that's bigger than something very narrow that one person can do, you're going to need to be able to delegate and work with other people and trust that the other person will be able to do the job um, good enough. If you want to make everything perfect, you'll have this tendency to want to do everything yourself. And this is definitely something I've suffered with Zero to Finals. You'll notice that all the Zero to Finals books were written entirely by me. Um, and all the podcasts are recorded and then edited by Harry now, but reviewed again by me. All the videos, the similar thing, all done by me, all the illustrations done by me. So this is because of my perfectionist tendencies. The question is, if the question I have is, if I had kind of delegated out and said, okay, I want to create all these medical education resources. I'm going to get 100 different people all to work on it at the same time, collect it all together, and then just put it out into the world. I think for one, um, that would be this is me kind of justifying my perfectionist approach to Zero to Finals. For one, I think that I would um, I would still want to go through everything myself, so I'd end up still doing it all myself, just for my own kind of comfort level. And I think there's a nice aspect to the consistency of Zero to Finals that it's all been done by me. However, this is clearly something that has slowed down the process of creating the resources. Although, I wonder whether if I'd have created the resources by using lots of different people, whether the quality would be as high, maybe it would even be better. But I don't know. Here we go. You're watching me in real time debating my own perfectionist tendencies. Anyway, so back to the video. Difficulty delegating is one of the issues. But the main issue that I want to focus on today is the main issue is inaction. And I think this is something that people with perfectionism or perfectionist tendencies struggle with. So this is kind of procrastination, um, overwhelm, getting started, um, and this is really the feeling that you can't get started, you can't do something unless everything is perfect. And this might be even that you get started on something, feel that it's not perfect, and then you give up. or you do an hour's worth of work on it, it's going really well, but then when you come back to do another hour, it feels so overwhelming because you want it to go just as well. And really, it's this idea that it has to be perfect. And this is not just that your effort and your output needs to be perfect, but it's also, it has to be the perfect time of day. You have to be in the perfect environment. Your desk setup has to be perfect. You have to have a perfect night's sleep. You have to feel perfect. You have to feel motivated. You have to feel the right amount of caffeine or food. All of these perfect things have to line up before you can get started on this thing that you're going to create that's perfect. I was talking to someone close to me who struggles with perfectionism, and she was saying that um, one of the beliefs that she has kind of deep down is that the thing that she wants to create, there is only one perfect solution to this problem or this thing that needs to be created. And so the creation process is that she has to find the perfect, the single solution to that problem, which again is just going to create so much overwhelm in order to get started. There's so much pressure to get started. There's so much pressure to produce the perfect thing that it's really difficult to get started. So my solution for this, because I want to give you the way that I have overcome this tendency towards perfection and been able to take action. So this is how you take action. And the solution, the way you beat this, is to change your mindset from um, from a sort of final thing uh, attempt. So this is what you could say is summative, meaning you're creating the final product. Change your mindset from doing that. So let's say you sit down and you need to revise, or you need to produce an essay, or you're an architect trying to do a design, or you're a writer trying to write a fiction book. Whatever it is, change the mindset from summative, meaning the thing that you're trying to produce, that's what you're sitting down to do, to a practice mindset. So when you sit down to do a thing, let's say you're creating a new song or writing something, you're not actually doing the thing that you want to do. So when we procrastinate, what we're doing is putting off the important thing and doing something that's kind of a distraction instead. Well, this practice mindset is kind of like being that distraction. So you're tricking your mind in a way that your mind kind of thinks that you're procrastinating. So let's say you need to sit down and do this essay. Instead of sitting down to do the essay, sit down to practice the essay. So this means that the stakes are much, much more low. What you're thinking in your head is, this is just a kind of attempt. This isn't really, doing the thing. This is just me having a play with doing the thing. And so the way you think about this is that you're just sort of playing and practicing. Now, I'll come on to that. I'll come on to something else in a second, but something else which is important. But for this, the concept is that when you fail or it's not perfect, this is how you learn. So basically, if you sit down to do an essay, you play around with kind of what could the introduction to the essay be like. You just put down any old stuff. You could even put in, stuff that would be inappropriate, like swear words, or, just write whatever it is for the introduction. This is just kind of a practice, a play around with the introduction. This is not your final thing. And then what's happening is you're reviewing it and learning from that process of playing and practicing with it. And so, really, what you're doing is going through a feedback cycle. So, a feedback cycle looks like this: you take action, right? And then from that action, you get a result. So, let's say you're writing this essay, you just mess around with it. The result is the outcome of you messing around. And then you read through what you've written and you get reflection. You reflect on that. You say, "Oh, that wasn't too bad. This bit was terrible. I need to learn how to write this bit a bit better." And each time you uh, go through this action, look at the result, reflect, you learn something. Then you take action again. So this feedback cycle, the more times you can do this feedback cycle, the more you learn and the better you get at whatever skill it is that you're trying to do. So if you're writing an essay, really what you want to do is just put down any old nonsense, reflect on it, say that was nonsense. Okay, I need to do something a little bit different. You don't have to make massive changes and it doesn't have to go from this nonsense to perfection. It just has to get a little bit better. Then you reflect on that, then you learn and make it a little bit better. And what happens is when you do this feedback cycle over and over again, eventually you come to something which is much higher quality than if you were to just sit down and make the perfect thing the first time. Now, the final thing to come onto here is, let's say you need to finish whatever it is you're doing. So you get towards the end of your essay and you think, I've got my hand in 2 days' time. And your perfectionist tendencies are saying that you need to just keep working until it's perfect. Or you think it's the best you can achieve, but it's not perfect. And you think, I should scrap this and completely start again. But deep down, you know that's just not realistic. You're not going to be able to do it all again in 2 days. So, how do you manage this having to turn something in that you don't feel is quite perfect? And in a way, I came through this process with each of my Zero to Finals books. Each book has got over 100,000 words in it. And if I was to keep trying to make it perfect, I would have never published the first book. I would still be working on it because there's just so much, and there's always something that needs to be improved. There's always some tiny error to pick up on, and the guidelines are constantly changing. So by the time I finish writing a book, which takes about 9 months, some of the guidelines in there might be coming close to being out of date or something like that. But at some point, you have to just say, okay, that's it. I'm finished. I'll turn it in. And that can be a difficult thing to cope with as a perfectionist. I come across this with each one of my podcasts, each one of my videos, each one of my articles. And to be honest, it's the same thing with in general practice when I'm seeing patients, or I'm doing any kind of referrals or any kind of work in almost any environment, really. So, how do you cope with finishing? So, this is my solution for taking action, getting started. Then, this is kind of the middle bit of just going through again and again and again, not trying to make each attempt perfect, but just trying to learn from it. But at some point, you have to finish and say, that's it, I'm done. The way to do this is to say to yourself, next time will be perfect. So, what you've got to realize is that every essay is not the last essay that you're going to do. Every sort of any kind of project, every book you write, every day's work, every week is not going to be perfect. And it's the next one that what you can do is say the next one will be perfect, and that kind of eases your perfectionist, or this is how I deal with it, is eases my perfectionist tendencies, is to say, okay, this one's done, I'm not going to work on it anymore. It's not perfect. I know it's not perfect, but the next one I'll make perfect. However, when the next one comes along, that one also, you'll say to yourself, the next one will be perfect. So you're kind of tricking yourself into thinking you will make the next one perfect, but when the next one arrives, you know it's not going to be perfect at the time. You'll have to hand that one in and say the next one will be perfect. And that way, in a sense, you're still going through this feedback cycle, but you're at least handing something in and getting it done. So I hope that was helpful. That was a little rundown of my thoughts on perfectionism and the solutions that I've worked on for perfectionism. And I would say that one of the biggest things is if you can overcome this tendency towards perfectionism, take the good bits, keep your standards high. Here are the good bits. Keep your standards high, keep your attention to detail, keep striving for improvement, but work on the downsides like spending too long on a task, feeling overwhelmed and stressed, and difficulty delegating. If you work on those things by looking at them from the process of just a learning feedback cycle, and that the next thing will be perfect, but you don't have to be perfect this time. That can make things more playful, more fun, and enjoyable. And actually, over time, that will improve the quality of your work because you're getting much more learning and more feedback cycles through your action. So I hope that was helpful. I'll see you in the next video, which hopefully is tomorrow.